All right, everyone. So today's lunchtime lesson, we're going to be talking about two words which are really commonly confused, and those are as or like. Yeah. So before we start talking about them, if you've got a pen and a paper, or if you want to be more modern, you can open a Google Doc on your computer, whatever you prefer. And I just want you to have a look at these sentences and make a little note if you think they are correct or if they're incorrect. If you think they're incorrect, consider how you want to change them. All right, so we are going to talk today, guys, about as and like, and those examples I just gave you, those are some of the really common mistakes that I hear all the time from students. Like and as can be really confusing because they quite often have similar functions, but also they're used in a variety of lots of different functions as well, okay? And this is why logically it's hard for us to choose them correctly, but as well as the different functions, as and like quite often have a different register too, so they can be formal or informal, and quite often students don't choose the appropriate one for the register that you're working with. So as well as that, we also use them in quite a lot of expressions. We're not going to look at the expressions so much today, we're just going to focus on the functions. And I'm just going to take you through, some of it's quite basic, but like I say, it is things that are repeated errors by people. And then we're just going to consider a little bit as well the register of as and like, okay? So as and like, we'll use them a lot for making comparisons. So of course we'd have, sort of your basic comparative structure to say something is the same or has the same quality as, with as an adjective as, yeah? So what I mean by that is she loves curry as much as I do. He's not as tall as his brother. It's not as expensive as the other hotel. That dog is as big as that child, okay? Which I'm sure you've all seen before and you probably are familiar with, right? And we also have the expression the same as, to say that something is equal, okay? So your phone is the same as mine. Texting isn't the same as in person. Please be careful because it is not the same than, which is a really common mistake that I hear all the time as well. Okay, so this does not exist. Yeah, the same as. Okay, so that's the way that we use as for making comparisons, and we also use like for making comparisons. So we use like with a noun to say that two things are very similar. Yeah, so for example, okay, he's like a father to me. She's acting like a child. It's like a burger, but with mushrooms. Or there are lots of people like us. Yeah. So I'm also using like to compare here. But it's a little bit different because in these examples, if I say he's like a father to me, is he my father? No. Okay. She's acting like a child. Is she a child? No. And it's like a burger, but is it a burger? No. Okay. So in these examples here, I'm making a comparison of similarity, but it's not like the examples we saw before where I'm talking about something that is equal. Okay. So if I say it's as big as this car, that's to say it's an equal size, right? So we've got a slightly different function of how we're making these comparisons. Let me give you a couple of more examples. So let's look at this sentence, okay? He's working as a childminder. A childminder, guys, if you don't know that word, similar to a babysitter, okay? But for like more periods of time. And she's acting like a child that we saw over here. So let's think about the functions of as in the and like in these examples. So in the first one, what is as doing here? Is it making a comparison? So we're describing specifically here a job, or in this case, a function. A job or a function, in this case, a job, yeah? Okay, so as is being used here, not to make a comparison, but to provide a description. But like is the same as the example we saw over here, yeah? So here, this is using to compare. So like we said here, she's acting like a child. She isn't actually a child. I'm just making a comparison about that. So a good example of that would be to say, I'm working like a dog. Yeah, and I'm working as a dog. Okay, those are two very, very different things. Right, now this is a really common mistake as well, guys. He's as a father to me. Okay, I see this all the time. So I cannot use as to make this, let's call it, in English we call it quite often similes, right? So it's to say that you're making a comparison, but it's not a real one. Okay, it's like an imaginary comparison, if you like. So what's the problem? What should we have? Like. Okay. What about this sentence? What's wrong with this sentence? So we always need to have an article. Okay. Whenever you're talking about jobs in English, you need to have an article. I think everyone is a Spanish speaker on the call today. Watch out for that, guys. That's a first language translation problem, because in Spanish you do not use an article when you talk about professions, right? So that's why we make these little mistakes. So when we're talking about comparisons, you'll very often see like used with what we call verbs of the senses. So verbs of the senses are seem, appear, taste, feel, right? So all of these ones, okay? For example, all of these examples, right? She looks like her mother, it sounds like a cat, nothing tastes like, it smells like, okay, it feels like. It's very, very commonly used like this. If we're making a comparison with a clause, does everyone know what a clause is? So a clause is a group of words which has meaning. So if I say cup, that's just one word. But if I say a big cup with tea, that is a clause. Okay, so it's a group of words connected which has meaning. So if I want to make one of these kind of comparisons, yeah, one to say to describe something, to say it's similar, then I don't use like, I use as if, or I use as though. Okay, so you look as if you've seen a ghost. So there's too many words here to use like. Or I felt as if I was floating above the ground. You talk as though we're never going to see each other again. Okay, so I don't say you look like you've seen a ghost, or you talk like we're never going to see each other again. Yeah. Having said that, don't worry too much about that. Okay, it's not a communicative error. If you say like instead of as if or as though, everyone's going to understand you. Okay, it's not a tragedy. There's more important things to consider about when we're using as and like, but just be aware of it. Right, another time that we use as and like is if we're giving examples. Okay, so there are two important aspects to this, right? So let's look at some examples first of all. So I love healthy food like kale and spinach. Yeah, I'm giving an example. Or eating healthy food such as kale and spinach is important. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing I really want to point out is when I'm using as an example, it has to have the word such. I can't use it independently, okay? You have to use such if you're going to give an example. Yeah. A mistake I always see is eating healthy food as kale and spinach. All right, watch out for that. Make sure that you're using such. The second thing, guys, that we need to think about is the register. Okay, so look at these two sentences. Which is more formal, sentence number 1 or sentence number 2? Pop that in the chat box. Number 2, thank you. See lots of peace outs. Good. How do you know that that second sentence is more formal? What information do you have? What helps you see that it's formal? Okay, the structure. All right, Raquel, so what about the structure? What changes from this one to this one? Look at the subject, guys. What's the subject of this sentence? What's the subject of this sentence? All right, so good, yeah. So I'm using a gerund here as my subject instead of a pronoun, right? So that's creating distance, okay? So by not making it personal, I'm making it more formal, yeah? Then we've got the word love here in that first sentence, which is more informal as well. And then, of course, the words that we've chosen to give our examples, okay? So if I changed those, if I said, I love healthy food such as kale and spinach, or eating healthy food like kale and spinach is important, in terms of meaning, that's not incorrect, okay? Because both of them are giving examples. However, it's not the best choice because of the register of the sentence we're working with, okay? So you want to consider, we're using like in an informal to neutral register, and we're using such as for a more formal register, yeah? If you're doing writing, guys, especially for exams, such as is a really nice choice for your essays, your reports, and your proposals. You could use like and such as for an essay report or a proposal for a first certificate or a Cambridge or an IELTS exam, because they're not overly formal, right? Remember, like is okay to be in a neutral register. So it's useful to have both because you can have more ways to give examples. But if you were writing an informal email to my friend, I would not use that structure, okay? It's overly formal. And the most important thing is to remember that, yeah? It has to have the word such. You can't use as by itself. So, as is also used as a linker. And what can make it really confusing as a linker is that it's got lots of different functions as well. So we'll see as being used as because in that a neutral to formal register. So all the tickets were sold out as we got there too late. I can substitute that with because. It will have the same meaning, okay? As the road was closed, I had to park on the next street because the road was closed. And it's exactly the same, okay? We can use as to mean while or during the time, right? And that's just a neutral register here. So she called as I was getting out of the bath, while I was getting out of the bath. Yeah. As they were arriving, while they were arriving, we were leaving, or during the time that we were arriving. Okay. We can also use as to mean in the way that. You can also think about these ones here, guys, as like chunks of language, okay? Think of them as more fixed phrases. So I would say, as we expected, it started to rain, right? Or as you know, classes restart on the 15th of January. Or I might say, as I said, I think this project will be a challenge. In more informal English, we will substitute this here with like, yeah? All right, so sometimes people might say like instead of as in a slightly more informal English. Okay, so if I say as I said earlier or like you said earlier, again, no difference in meaning. People are going to understand you perfectly. Okay, so let's go back to those sentences from the beginning, okay? Can you review your answers and decide if there's anything you want to change or if you're still happy with the answers that you gave at the start? Did you change any answers? Yeah? A few nods of the heads there? Okay. All right, so let's have a look then at the correct answers. So the first one there, guys, I work as waiter. We needed to have the article. Yeah, I work as a waiter. I look like a supermodel. That one was correct. Okay, there was no problems because we're using like to talk about, I'm not actually a supermodel, but to make that, description. He seems as a nice guy. He seems like a nice guy. Our verb of the sense is there. She enjoys studying lots of things as maths and science. We needed to include such, not such as. Yeah. She's very clever, but as me, she's too lazy to study. She's very clever, but like me, she's too lazy to study. Okay, because we have the noun, yeah, and we're making that comparison. And you, like you know, it's important to keep fit, as you know, not like. Yeah. In my experience, the ones that people make the most errors with is this one here, right? The such as. This one here, but like me. She's very clever, but as me. Yeah. Getting these, excuse me, getting these ones wrong. Okay, they're the ones to really be careful with, because they're the ones that have cause the biggest problems. All right, and these, again, I mean, they're not terrible errors, guys. If you're speaking to someone, everyone will understand exactly what you're saying, but it's a bit like the gerunds and infinitives. When we talked about gerunds and infinitives, these are the kind of errors that in writing really, really stand out and look crap, for the want of a better word. Okay, they don't look nice. If you're doing exams, they're the kind of things that examiners are going to notice and mark you down for. Okay, so please watch out for those.